hosts and somebody who helped make this all possible from the DU Law Dems, the DU Law Democrats, who's here. And they, if you don't know, I think you'll hear a little bit about them now, but they've done a lot of great things here in the community, brought a lot of great things onto campus. They've helped us get here today. And I want to introduce Kasey Baker, who is a third-year law student and the president of the DU Law Den. So start right off with Kasey.
Thanks, Owen. Hi, everyone. We're really happy to have you all here today. We're really excited to have this event. We're one of the oldest and largest organizations at the law school, and part of our mission is to bring events like this to campus. Our activities kind of vary every year depending on what's actually going on politically, but mainly we bring prominent speakers to campus, help organize precinct caucuses, distribute information about democratic organizations, and serve as a focal point for the law school as far as democratic activism. So I'd just like to thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, I have to go to class, but thanks again, and I'll pass it off to Owen.
Thanks, Kasey. And I'm going to get right into it because I'm racing the clock, and I've got a horn that's going to tell everybody when it's time to go. But I want to start off by saying, it's really humbling to be here speak on a day when Congressman John Lewis and President Bill Clinton and President Jimmy Carter and President Barack Obama all spoke about the empowering nature of speech and of action. So it's a special day to do this, and I appreciate people being here. It's also, I'm filled with awe to be here on the 5th anniversary of when many of us here shared Barack Obama's nomination in Denver 5 years ago today at the Mile High Stadium. And then I'm almost paralyzed with the daunting challenge of speaking 50 years after 1963, and when Martin Luther King kind of, on a day, among many days, took the mantle of a founding father by giving birth to the American dream again, and kind of taking out of the shadows and into the light the hard work that was going on, block by block, counter by counter, bus by bus, step by step. And as I said, it's a really special day to do this for me, and I'm so glad that you guys could be here on a day like this and be involved in speaking out and acting on behalf of your community and your country and your planet for an event like this. So thanks so much for coming, and I hope we get some more folks showing up. But as hard as it is to capture this moment on a day when so many people have spoken so eloquently today, I hope you heard a lot of the speeches. I'm challenged with something even more daunting for an English major, which is to speak to you all about, give an overview of climate change science. I am not a scientist, and I will make it as quick as I can for that reason. I've had the opportunity to see a couple great speakers this month and get a couple tips from them and a couple slides from them that I wanted to share. So I will power through and try to give you an overview and set the stage for our great panel here. I want to start with what I think is a beautiful image here. It is a little troublesome, and I struggle with it a little bit, but this is the South Fork fire, the West Fork complex fire over the town of South Fork. This was taken, I think, on June 25th, the same day that President Obama was making his speech on climate change. And it's troubling in a way to find this beauty in fire, but at the same time, I do find that beauty. It is a part of nature. It has its place in our natural cycles. When left on its own, I think it helps keep things in check. It helps keep the system in balance. It helps avoid the kind of, when we let fire burn as it naturally does, it helps avoid the kind of intense crowning fires that we're getting right now, that we're becoming too familiar with these days. I think we have stepped in and interceded in this natural, with this natural element, I believe a bit as a result of the lure of a mirage. And so I start sort of with Wallace Stegner, who says, what lures many people to the West always has been and still is mirage. We see the snow-capped mountains and we think we're in the land of plenty where the bluebird sings to the lemonade springs. But it is a dry, arid country, and we fool ourselves when we think it isn't. I think a lot of what goes on with our with our issues in the climate, in the environment in the West, has to do with the misinterpretation of the landscape, and it's enhanced by climate change. I'll start with the bad news, and that is that this thing we've heard about of global warming, you might have heard about it last century or last decade, journalists have discovered it is still out there, maybe, but still be an issue. I am a journalist, and so I know of where these fine folks at The Onion speak. And I mostly write about baseball now, but 11 years ago I was spending the summer working, covering the fires in the West. And I started down in New Mexico, and at that point several fires had burned for a couple months to accumulate almost 100,000 acres of forest. That seemed like a lot, it was a lot. I covered the Hayman fire. This is a picture from the Hayman fire, where we had 138,000 acres burned and 133 homes lost. That was the worst fire in Colorado at that time. A decade later, we watched Waldo Canyon fire burn and 18,000 acres, taking 350 homes. That became the worst fire of Colorado's history until a year later, when we saw the Black Forest fire. And I don't know if these figures are still accurate, but 14,000 acres and 509 homes destroyed. That gives you an average of, interesting, of 1,000 acres per home lost in 2002's fire, big fire that I mentioned. 60 acres per home lost in last year's fire in Waldo Canyon, and 28 acres per home lost in this year's fire in the Black Forest. You can draw some conclusions about what that means, but you see where we're moving, and you see, I mean, literally that we are moving into the fire zone, and that causes a lot of the issue, and I think that's part of that lure of the mirage of the West. I want to talk briefly about what I heard from years ago from Colorado fire behavior analyst Brad Smith, and he told me Fire Behavior 101 boils down to fuels, weather, and topography. And I believe in the West, where we've got such rugged topography and fragile fuels, and then this erratic weather, and then we add climate change as a stress enhancer, this becomes a very delicate balance. And I think climate change obviously affects at least two of those three ingredients, but I would argue all three. Stegner, who I referenced earlier, he makes the case that the story of the West, what matters in the West is water, and there isn't much of it. We act as though there is, and I think that's where we're heading for trouble. That's where we get issues of drought and the enhanced stress enhancer of climate change. I don't know if I should try to give my brief climate change science. Don't laugh at me, but part of what happens in a real generic way that won't be above anybody's head, as the temperature heats up, we've got water in the soil, and that's important. You can see a difference in temperature if you've got a watered soil and a dry soil next to each other. There can be a 15 difference degree in temperature. So as we heat up, we get that water out of the soil. That, one, gets us drought conditions, but it, two, brings water into the atmosphere, and that throws off all the water cycles. So much of climate change, in a nutshell, without getting really into science, is about what happens as the water cycles change, and you get that water into the atmosphere, and the way the Earth heats up differently at the different poles and things like that. But to keep it really simple. And then we get, as Brad Udall says, you get the wet gets wetter and the dry gets drier. You get more intense flood and droughts. You see more rain, less snow, earlier runoff, higher water temperatures, more intense rain. It sometimes seems illogical, and people wonder, how can you be talking about global warming and all this when we're seeing hurricanes and storms and things that don't seem to be heating up. But they are the result of heating up, and they are the result of this water change and the water cycle change. I think it's undeniable in this room, I imagine, that the fossil fuels that we put out there do heat up our Earth, heat up the temperatures. And this chart at the bottom here, same thing I'm looking at, it shows you the relationship between the temperatures in the summertime temperatures and the fire frequency. So as the black line goes with summertime temperatures, spring and summer temperatures, so the red wildfire frequency lines go. And there is obviously a direct correlation there that I don't think we need to argue about in the room today. When I talk about the possible third element of those three that climate change would enhance, I mean, fuel and weather, I think we understand how it enhances. This is a glimpse at how it may enhance the topography itself. This is the picture of the floods in Manitou Springs just a couple weeks ago. And if I haven't mentioned it yet, a lot of these slides come from Brad Udall from the Getchus Wilkinson Center in Boulder, and Chuck Kutcher, who did a great presentation in Golden a couple of weeks ago. So I think we see the effects longer term of the changing topography, and that's where I get where, oh my goodness, I gotta power through and finish up here. That's not my warning, but here's a quick chart that shows U.S. record temperatures broken in 2012. This doesn't seem natural to me, to have that many temperatures broken in any one year.
Which way are they broken?
Most of these, that's a good question, most of these are record highs, but they're not all record highs, but they're mostly record highs. This shows quickly just the relationship between those rising summertime temperatures and the diminishing rain. You end up with a situation where Satan called and wants his weather back. But really quickly, just trying to wrap up. This is something we're very familiar with, I think, and this is where the climate change starts to affect the flora, the fauna, wildlife, insect life. This is an example you probably all recognize of beetle kill impact on Colorado mountains, forests. This is a map that shows beetle effect through all North America. About 50 million acres here in British Columbia compared to our 3 or 4 million acres in Colorado. If you don't know, I mean, I think it's, we heard Perlmutter talk about it last week. I want to go back, or a couple weeks ago. But pretty basic science, pretty basic understanding of what happens with the beetle kill. The warmer temperatures are extending the life cycle. They're getting actually an additional life cycle each season, and they're living longer, being able to make a bigger impact. Normally you get the cold wiping them out. Normally they don't get as high altitude because of the cold. But all this is affecting, obviously affecting the life, insect life, animal life in the forest. But this is a good example of how that in turn affects the forest life, how that in turn becomes, this tinderbox that makes these fires so much more volatile and creates the environmental health issues that we're going to get to later in the evening. And let's see, moving to the end, I want to finish with water. This is a picture of Lake Powell that Brad Udall took in July of 2004. It's at 40% capacity. I covered a protest at the lake a couple years before that where people wanted to drain the lake and restore the river to its natural path. I think there's something to that, but I don't think this is the way they wanted to do it. What we're experiencing is what I started off with, of this resource gap. We are approaching the point where we're not going to be able to meet the water needs in the West. This chart shows you the two biggest U.S. reservoirs since 1935, Lake Mead, and if my arrow, yeah, it's showing up. Lake Mead, when that comes into existence in 1935, we come up to this level, and we stay near this level for a while until 1963 when we add Lake Powell, and then we rise up, and we get to a period that seems like normalcy up here in the 80s. It's probably really an anomaly in the long-term range of things to have that period without drought. We really are an arid country, and that was not an arid time in Colorado. But what's happened since then, since 2000, is we've gotten to a period of unprecedented drought, 14 years straight of unprecedented drought. And that you can dramatically see in the water levels in these two primary reservoirs, where it is dropping, where's my pointer? There we go. It's dropping down here, and where I am right here, where my arrow is there, you can see that right, that's about a month from now. That's the projection for the end of September, the end of this water year. And so at the end of September this year, I keep losing my arrow, but at the end of September, we'll be back at the lowest water levels we've ever had since Lake Powell opened in 1968, since it was filling up in 1968. So this is dramatic loss of water, dramatic imbalance of resource. The Bureau of Reclamation is probably going to, within a year or two, declare a shortage in the Colorado River that's never been declared before. And they anticipate in their report last December that within 50 years, by 2060, we'll have a 20% imbalance in the water needs and the water supply in the West. That means potentially 6 million homes with median climate change gets us to that point, where 6 million homes are impacted by that water imbalance, and that's potentially 20 to 25 million people. So that's my overview, my gloom and doom, laying the foundation for this panel here, telling us where we are with fossil fuels, raising temperatures, changing water cycles, altering ecosystems, changing weather, fueling our fires, and calling for a panel like these four folks to get us out of it and find the way through mitigation and adaptation, some kind of solution. One positive note to leave you with, Wallace Stegner, he thinks this is land of hope. He says, we can't be pessimistic about the West. This is the native home of hope. When it fully learns that cooperation, not rugged individualism, is the quality that most characterizes and preserves it, then it will have achieved itself and outlived its origin. Then it has a chance to create a society to match its scenery. That's what I think we're all working for here, to get to that place where we have a society that matches our scenery. And I leave it to this panel to get us there. It is, as I've said, very exciting to have these folks here on this day, and to start with Will Townsend, who's come here from the Black Forest. And I just think this is a really special day, and I can't say it enough. And to me, it's special to have somebody like Will here, who is speaking out and is acting in his community, experienced the Black Forest fire with his family, and is trying to take action to make things better in the short term for the people who suffered more than he did down there, not to belittle anything of yours, but and also in the long term to address climate change. So I turn it over now to Will Townsend from Black Forest.
Hello, like Owen said, I'm Will Townsend. I'm with Black Forest Strong. I live right on the border where the fire burned up to. I am also the Deputy State Coordinator for Organizing for Action. So I have quite a bit to tell you guys. I'm going to start off with some of my personal background, what I experienced during the fire, our recovery efforts, and then what I'm doing and what Organizing for Action is doing to combat climate change. Because we have a few congressional delegates who don't seem to believe in it, and we're going to put them in shape. So basically about me, I have lived in Black Forest for almost the past 8 years. Even went to high school there. I'm going to college right now, not in Black Forest, but I live there. And when I first moved there, it was wonderful. As a kid growing up, you have flowing creeks, you have a really unique forest ecosystem. And as I started getting older, I started to see, well, the creeks are starting to recede. Our climate's getting drier, and our trees are starting to get more and more brittle. I thought maybe it's me growing up, forest didn't seem as majestic anymore. But then you look at the weather patterns, and we've slowly been losing our monsoon season in Black Forest. Things have gone to such extremes that we're happy if it rains once a week. Which when I first moved here, it was, oh crap, it's going to rain every day. I was a baseball player in high school, And if practice was getting kind of boring, I could count on the rain to save me. But we started to lose that, and Black Forest started to dry up. And it was visible to me. I'm not a climate expert, never will claim to be. But I can notice, and the rest of the community noticed, as conservative as a community as it is, we've all noticed the climate get drier. And after last year's Waldo Canyon fire, people started to mitigate their properties. Wasn't done fast enough. And everyone had that fear in their heart. Maybe a fire is going to strike. You wait, you get your text updates. There's always little fires in Black Forest, but you never realize it's going to be a big one. Then on July 11th, I get the text. I was downtown working. I was working for State Senator John Morse at the time. Downtown working on his campaign. I get a text from our office. All of a sudden, fire in Black Forest. I thought, okay, well this is another fire, but I'll drive up to my house just to make sure everything's okay. I look up and there's a giant plume of smoke from the road I live on. Now you can imagine that feeling, going to where your house is and seeing a huge plume of smoke. I'm talking massive. I could see it from 20 miles away. You think, am I going to be able to get back in time to save my possessions? Is my family going to be able to get out in time? It's nerve-wracking. I was able to get in after about an hour and a half of traffic, trying to get into the forest. So many people are going home. It's hard to get back in. Plus, the county decided to continue doing construction in Black Forest during the time of trying to evacuate. We get in, evacuate. Within 5 minutes of me returning home, we got the emergency 911 call, get out now. We were able to, get everything that we needed out. Then we were evacuated for, not 1, 2, 3 days. We were evacuated for 12 days. It's pretty nerve-wracking. You're wondering, is my house okay? You're waiting for that list to update to see what houses burnt down, what didn't. You look on the list and you see your neighbor. That's not a feeling I want anyone to have to experience. And you see some houses that they don't have, some houses listed. You're wondering, crap, do they even know if my house is here or not? We have 430 acres up in the forest. The fire burnt right up to our border, and we were really, really lucky. We didn't lose a single leaf. Burnt right up to us, dropped. We mitigated the week before though, and I attribute a lot of our success to the fact that we did that. Now what we're doing in the forest is we've established a nonprofit. I don't know if any of you have heard of La Forêt. It's in Black Forest, Conference and Retreat Center. My dad's the executive director. We use a lot of La Forêt's resources to help out with the recovery. We're the biggest, oldest nonprofit in Black Forest, and a lot of people look to us as a community focal point. What we did was we established a resource center for people to use during the fire. Our county commissioners, who are, for lack of a better word, aloof during many of the recovery efforts, didn't really seem to be contributing too much. So, being in the Black Forest independent nature, we started our own nonprofit. We've been taking care of our own people. We're addressing a lot of the recovery needs. Black Forest is, I think, the first fire in Colorado in recent history where it wasn't, these big mansions being burnt down. There were some of those, but there was also a lot of uninsured homes and renters. There's about 75 total property losses that were not insured. And in addition, we lost a couple hundred barns and outbuildings, all of which typically aren't insured as well. So we had huge losses, which weren't calculated for during a lot of the newspapers' reportings, things like that. And we've set up to address all those. We've been working with the Small Business Administration, grief counseling centers, a lot of different groups to bring the community together. One of the other things we're doing is Black Forest is still one of the most at-risk communities for another wildfire, believe it or not. The south side of the forest untouched, incredibly dry, and a lot of the forest that was burned, the trees survived, but now they have no water supply, they're just as dry. So we're more at risk than ever, even before the fire, to have another wildfire. So what we've been doing is mitigating our properties and helping our community turn into a fire-wise community. We have a great state senator who's going to share some of her experiences with you all about mitigation and how important mitigation is, so I won't touch on it too much. But actually, Organizing for Action, the group I'm Deputy State Director for, we're taking on climate change now. We said, look, we had 2 massive wildfires in my county in a year. I flew out to DC a few weeks ago. I was on a climate change panel like this, and we discussed a lot of different techniques that we could use to, really get our congressmen to take action on climate change. And while we have a great state legislature that's doing wonders to help promote mitigation, we have a lot of natural or national forests, which, unless we get congressional action, we're not going to be able to mitigate. So we're putting as much pressure as we can on our congressional delegation to sponsor mitigation efforts and to help reverse climate change. Now, I don't know how many of you know Doug Lamborn. I don't know how many of you actually want to know Doug Lamborn. But he's my congressman down in Colorado Springs. So this year we had Black Forest Fire, we also had the Royal Gorge Fire. Previous year we had the Waldo Canyon Fire, all of which are in his district. You know what he did 2 weeks ago? He introduced a bill to deregulate the oil and gas industry. And to make it so that they could, pollute our Colorado river supply. That's not the kind of action I want from a representative whose constituents are losing their homes. So what we've decided to do at Organizing for Action is to put as much pressure on our congressional delegates as possible. Many states, a lot of states have many priorities. In Colorado, we really have 2. We're doing comprehensive immigration reform, but our big one is climate change. We have great volunteers like Owen Perkins, who are really stepping up and doing a lot to help us educate and to create the conversation on climate change and how it affects wildfires. Because I'll tell you what, after the wildfire, I didn't hear a single one of our congressional delegates, Democrat or Republican, go on air and say, look, these wildfires are a result of climate change. And there's overwhelming evidence for it. Owen just presented you some. These speakers will present you some as well. So we're making that our top priority. We passed out 2 weeks ago a Climate Denier Award at congressional offices. They were a unicorn statue. We figured if they're going to deny overwhelming scientific evidence, then perhaps they believe in unicorns and other mystical animals. But we were at every single Republican congressional office these past 2 weeks, giving them their award, drumming up press, really trying to put the pressure on them to flip their position on climate change. And that goes, we're a nonpartisan organization, so we're going to go after Democrats if they don't, support the evidence of climate change. So we're doing a lot to mobilize, to put pressure on our congressional delegates. What we need people like you to do is to help volunteer with us. We need to make phone calls to volunteers across the state to reactivate our base. I'm sure a lot of you pay attention to MSNBC, some of those news stations. After the election, even though we hadn't won our Congress back, a lot of news sources were saying, watch out for President Obama's army, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard that. Watch out for his grassroots army. They're going to knock on your door. They're going to do everything to turn public opinion against their against the congressional representatives. And it's going to be really, really easy in Colorado to do that, especially when we keep losing as many homes as we've lost. So we're going to go after our 4 Republican climate deniers and really force them to flip their position. Do I think all of them will flip their position? Absolutely not. I think the Republican Party, not the Republican Party, I think these Republican candidates, these congressional delegates, are wholly owned subsidiaries of the oil and gas industry. I don't think there's any denying that. Why else would they be in favor of, destroying our planet simply for profit? We're going to be putting as much pressure on these our congressional delegates as possible, making them take a stand and help lead our Congress in development. And I'll tell you what, in 10 years, if we don't act on climate change now, if we don't reverse our trends, Black Forest is going to look pretty nice compared to a lot of wildfires that will take place. So we really need everyone, if possible. This is my field pitch, if you don't mind, Owen. You see the event sponsored by Organizing for Action. Go to BarackObama.com, find an event, and sign up for it. We're going to be doing a lot throughout the state. We really need a lot of people to help us act on climate. We have a few days left of the August recess. We're going to be really hitting hard, and even after the August recess, we're going to be hitting some of these congressmen who are up for re-election pretty soon. So yeah, if you guys could volunteer, we really need you. It's such an important issue. We can't let up now. The campaign is over, but our work is not.